The day my brother said I didn't deserve Mom's house, I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even cry. I just stood there in the living room where we had grown up, and I felt something inside me quietly break. It wasn't about the house. Not really. It was about what the house meant. The kitchen where Mom baked apple pies every Sunday. The hallway where our height marks were still penciled into the wall. The front porch where she waited every evening until we came home. When my brother looked at me and said, "You were never here like I was," I felt like he had erased my entire life with one sentence. I had been there. Maybe not in the same way, maybe not every single day, but I had been there. And in that moment, standing in that old living room with the curtains half drawn and dust floating in the sunlight, I realized something. Grief does not always pull families closer. Sometimes it pulls them apart. And sometimes the hardest part of losing a mother is watching your sibling become a stranger. Mom's house sat on Willow Street. A small white house with blue shutters. Nothing fancy, just solid, steady, like her. She moved into that house in 1972 with my father. They painted the walls themselves, planted roses in the front yard, built a wooden swing in the backyard for us. I was the oldest. My brother Daniel was 3 years younger. He was always louder than me, braver, more sure of himself. I was quieter, the peacemaker, the one who cleaned up after arguments, the one who stayed close to Mom in the kitchen while Daniel played outside. But Mom loved us the same. At least, that's what I always believed. After Dad passed away 15 years ago, Mom stayed in that house alone. Daniel lived only 10 minutes away. I lived 40 minutes out, closer to my daughter and her children. I visited every weekend, sometimes twice a week. I brought groceries, sat with her at the kitchen table. We drank tea. We talked about everything and nothing. Daniel handled the heavy things. He fixed the sink, mowed the lawn, took her to doctor appointments when I couldn't. We both helped, just in different ways. But I never thought we were keeping score. Mom slowed down in her final year. Not suddenly, just gently, like a clock winding down. She moved more carefully, slept more often in her armchair by the window. She liked when I brushed her hair. It was thin by then, soft as cotton. Sometimes she would hold my hand and say, "You've always had a gentle heart." I didn't think much of it at the time. Daniel came by almost every evening. He brought takeout, checked her medications, handled the bills. He was practical, efficient. Mom used to smile when he left and say, "He carries the world on his shoulders." We were different, but we both loved her. At least I thought that was enough. The morning she passed was quiet, too quiet. The house felt heavy when I walked in. Daniel was already there. He looked tired, smaller somehow. "She went peacefully," he told me. I nodded. There were no dramatic goodbyes, no last words. Just silence, the kind that fills a room long after someone is gone. We sat at the kitchen table together. Neither of us spoke much. The house didn't feel like ours anymore. It felt like a memory. Mom had written a will years ago. Simple, clear. At least that's what we believed. We met at her lawyer's office 2 weeks after the funeral. I remember the soft ticking of a clock on the wall, the sound of papers sliding across a desk. The lawyer cleared his throat gently. "Your mother wished for her estate to be divided equally between her 2 children. Equal. That word felt steady, fair. The house would either be sold and profits divided, or one of us could buy the other's share." Daniel shifted in his chair. He looked serious, focused. I assumed we would talk it through calmly, like adults, like siblings. I never imagined that was the day something fragile would begin to crack. We went back to Willow Street together. The air smelled like rain. The roses in the front yard were overgrown. Daniel walked through each room slowly, touching walls, opening cabinets. This house should stay in the family, he said quietly. I agree, I answered. He nodded. Then he said something that surprised me. I've done more here. I've been here every day. I looked at him carefully. We both helped Mom, I said softly. He didn't answer right away. He just kept looking around, like he was measuring something. That was the first moment I felt it. Not anger. Not yet. Just distance. A thin line forming where there hadn't been one before. That afternoon, the house felt different. Not empty. Not sad. Just tense. Daniel stood in the living room with his hands on his hips, looking around as if he already belonged to it in a different way. I can't imagine selling this place, he said. I'm not saying we should, I replied gently. He nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on the walls. You moved away, he added after a moment. It wasn't loud, it wasn't sharp, but it landed heavy. I moved closer to my daughter, I said softly. Mom understood that. He gave a small shrug. Still, I was the one here every day. There it was. The beginning of keeping score. Over the next few days, the conversations grew quieter and heavier. We met at the house again to sort through Mom's things. Her clothes, her dishes, old photo albums stacked neatly in the hallway closet. We opened drawers together, careful, slow, but something had shifted. Daniel picked up a stack of old receipts from the kitchen counter. I paid most of these, he said. I looked at him. I never asked you to. I'm just saying, he replied. I carried a lot. His voice wasn't angry. It was tired, but it sounded like he needed recognition. And maybe he did. I know you did, I told him. And I'm grateful. He didn't answer. He just continued sorting, but I could feel it now. A quiet competition neither of us had ever agreed to enter. Later that afternoon, I sat on the living room floor, flipping through an old photo album. Daniel sat across from me. There was a picture of Mom holding my high school diploma, another of Daniel in his baseball uniform. We both smiled faintly. She was proud of us, I said. Yeah, he replied. Then he added, she depended on me more at the end. I closed the album slowly. She depended on both of us. But I was here, he repeated. The words were becoming a rhythm. I was here. I was here. I was here. Each time he said it, it felt less like a fact and more like a claim. A week passed. We spoke mostly about paperwork, bank accounts, utilities, practical things. But the warmth was gone. The easy laughter we once shared at the kitchen table had disappeared. I found myself choosing my words carefully, avoiding certain topics, avoiding saying too much about my time with Mom. It felt as if every memory I mentioned needed proof. One afternoon, I said gently, Mom always told me she wanted the house to feel peaceful. Daniel stopped what he was doing. She told me she wanted it to stay with me, he said quietly. I blinked. She never said that to me. He shrugged again. Well, she did. There was no way to confirm it. Mom wasn't there to clarify. And somehow, that made it worse. 3 weeks later, Daniel made it clear. I want to keep the house, he said. We were standing in the kitchen. The same kitchen where Mom used to hum while washing dishes. That's fine, I replied. Then we'll have it appraised and settle the difference. He looked at me. Long. Hard. You'd really make me buy you out? The way he said it made it sound cold. As if I were demanding something unfair. It's what Mom wrote, I said softly. Equal. He shook his head slowly. You didn't do what I did. I felt my chest tighten. What do you mean? I gave up time, money, energy. You came when it was convenient. The words were calm, but they cut. I came every weekend, I said. I called every night. That's not the same, he replied. There it was. The line drawn clearly now, not just about money, about worth. And then he said it, not loudly, not cruelly, just firmly. You don't deserve this house like I do. The room went still. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed louder. I stared at him. I searched his face for hesitation, for regret. There was none, just certainty. And that hurt more than anger ever could. "I don't deserve it?" I asked quietly. "You weren't here like I was," he said again. The words echoed in the small kitchen. I wasn't here. I wasn't here. I wasn't here. But I had been. In different ways. In quiet ways. In emotional ways. In ways that don't leave receipts or repair bills. I had brushed her hair, held her hand, listened to her fears late at night. But how do you measure that? How do you place a value on presence that isn't physical? I looked at Daniel then, not as my opponent, but as the little boy who once cried when he scraped his knee, the boy Mom used to rock on that same kitchen chair. Grief had changed him. It had hardened something inside him. Maybe he needed the house to feel close to her. Maybe he believed ownership meant loyalty. Maybe he believed proximity meant sacrifice. I didn't know, but I did know this. We were no longer talking about property. We were talking about love. And who had loved her more? I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I simply picked up my purse. "I never wanted to compete with you," I said softly. He didn't respond. I walked to the front door. The hallway felt longer than usual. I paused by the height marks on the wall. My name, his name, penciled lines climbing upward year after year. Mom's handwriting beside them. I touched the wall gently. Then I opened the door. The air outside felt cool. Fresh, but heavy. I heard Daniel behind me. "You're really going to make this difficult?" I turned slowly. "I just want what's fair," I answered. He shook his head, and that was the moment I understood something painful. Fair does not always feel fair when grief is involved. That night, I sat alone in my living room. No house. No papers. Just silence. I replayed his words over and over. "You don't deserve it." It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about the house. It was about being told that my years of quiet love were somehow less. And that is a wound deeper than inheritance. After that afternoon, Daniel and I did not speak for several days. Not because we agreed to stop, but because neither of us knew what to say. Grief already filled the air between us. Now something heavier sat there too. Pride, hurt, unspoken resentment. The house on Willow Street stood quiet while we avoided each other. It felt wrong. Mom would have hated this silence. She always said family should sit down and talk. But sitting down felt impossible now. 4 days later, my phone rang. It was Daniel. I stared at his name on the screen for a moment before answering. His voice was calm, almost businesslike. "I spoke to the realtor," he said. I swallowed. "Oh?" "She thinks the house would sell quickly." There was a pause. "But I don't want to sell." "I know," I said softly. "I can't afford to buy you out at full value," he continued. There it was. Not anger this time. Fear. "I'm not trying to hurt you," I said gently. "But Mom asked for equal." He let out a slow breath. "You always were the favorite," he muttered. The words were quiet, but they stunned me. "What?" I whispered. "She talked to you about feelings. She talked to me about responsibilities." I closed my eyes. "That doesn't mean she loved me more." He didn't respond, but something fragile cracked further in that moment. This wasn't just about a house. This was about years of comparison we never knew we were carrying. The next time we met was at the house again. Boxes lined the hallway. Mom's bedroom still smelled faintly like her perfume. We avoided each other's eyes at first. Then Daniel said something unexpected. "Do you remember when Dad lost his job?" "Yes," I answered quietly. "I was 15, he said. "I heard Mom crying in the kitchen. I remembered that night. The rain against the windows. The way Mom tried to smile in the morning. She told me not to worry," Daniel continued. "She said I had to be strong." He looked at me. "She told you to stay kind." The words hung there. Maybe that was true. Maybe Mom spoke to us differently because we were different. Not because she loved one more, but because she saw what each of us needed. Still, Daniel carried that memory like proof of something. Proof that he had always been the responsible one, the one expected to carry weight. And now, in his mind, the house was part of that weight. While sorting through Mom's desk, I found a small envelope tucked beneath a stack of papers. My name was written on the front. In her handwriting, my hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was a short letter. Simple, neat. She wrote, "My sweet girl, if you are reading this, I am already gone. Please remember that love cannot be measured by hours spent in a room. Your brother shows love in action. You show love in presence. Both matter. Don't let this house divide you. It is only wood and brick. Family is flesh and heart." I felt my eyes fill. Daniel was standing across the room. "What is it?" he asked. I hesitated. Then I walked over and handed him the letter. He read it slowly. His face changed. Not dramatically, but I saw something soften. "She wrote this just to you," he said quietly. "Yes." He folded it carefully and handed it back. "She never wrote me one." His voice didn't accuse. It simply stated, and somehow that hurt too, because I understood then. He wanted reassurance. The same way I did. We sat at the kitchen table again. The same table where Mom once placed birthday cakes. The same table where we did homework. The silence between us was thick. "Maybe you should take the house," Daniel said suddenly. I looked up. "What? If she wrote you letters like that, maybe she wanted you to have it." "That's not what she said," I answered gently. He rubbed his forehead. "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel." "You don't have to feel anything specific," I said softly. "I just know I can't lose this place." The word lose caught my attention. "You already lost her," I said quietly. He nodded. "And this is all that's left." There it was. Not greed, not entitlement, fear. He believed if he lost the house, he would lose the last physical piece of her. And I realized something painful. We were grieving in different languages. Days later, things grew tense again. An appraisal came in. The number was higher than Daniel expected. He stared at the paper. "There's no way," he said. "It's just market value," I replied calmly. "You're really going to take half?" The frustration in his voice was stronger now. "It's what Mom wrote," I repeated. "And what about what I gave?" he asked. I looked at him steadily. "You gave because you loved her." He shook his head. "I gave because someone had to." That sentence cut deeper than the first one, because now it wasn't about deserving the house. It was about resentment he had carried quietly for years. Maybe he felt alone in responsibility. Maybe he felt unseen. And I had never known. That night, I lay awake in my bed. The house on Willow Street replayed in my mind. The porch swing, the roses, the pencil marks on the wall. But more than that, I thought about Daniel as a teenager, taking on more than he should have. Hearing Mom cry in the kitchen, feeling he needed to be strong. Maybe he had been carrying that strength ever since. And maybe, in my gentler role, I hadn't seen how heavy it was for him. Still, that didn't make his words right. It didn't make mine wrong. It just made us human. A week later, I asked Daniel to meet me one more time at the house. The sun was setting when we arrived. Golden light filled the living room. Dust floated softly in the air. "I've been thinking," I said quietly. He looked cautious. "I don't want this house to be the reason we stop being siblings." He didn't answer. "I'm willing to work out a plan," I continued. "Installments, time, something manageable." He stared at the floor. "You do that?" "Yes." There was a long silence. Then he said, almost in a whisper, "I shouldn't have said you didn't deserve it." I didn't rush to respond, because apologies are fragile. They need space. Finally, I said, "I know you're hurting." He nodded slowly. "And so are you." For the first time in weeks, we were not opponents. We were just two older children who missed their mother. When Daniel whispered, I shouldn't have said you didn't deserve it. I didn't feel victory. I felt tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind that comes from holding your heart too tight for too long. We were standing in the living room. The sun was sinking behind the trees outside. The light came through the window in soft gold lines. For a moment, it almost felt like Mom was still there, quiet, watching. I shouldn't have said some things either, I replied gently. He looked up. You didn't. I did, I said. I kept repeating what was fair. But I never asked what you were feeling. He leaned back against the wall. I don't even know what I'm feeling, he admitted. And that was the most honest thing either of us had said. We sat down at the kitchen table again. That table had seen every stage of our lives. Spilled milk, homework tears, holiday laughter, and now, this. Daniel ran his fingers along the edge of the table. I thought if I kept this house, he said slowly, I wouldn't lose her completely. I nodded. I know. She was here every day. Her voice, her footsteps, the way she turned off lights behind me. He paused. If the house is gone, it feels like she disappears. I understood that fear, but I also understood something else. She's not in the walls, I said softly. She's in what she taught us. He didn't answer right away. Sometimes truth takes time to settle. Over the next few weeks, we began sorting through Mom's belongings again. But this time, the air felt lighter, still sad, still heavy at moments, but no longer sharp. We worked quietly, side by side. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. We found old recipe cards. Daniel smiled at one. She burned this pie 3 times before she got it right. I laughed softly. She blamed the oven. We shared that memory without tension, without measuring who had been there more. It was just ours, together. The appraisal still stood. The numbers were real. Daniel truly couldn't pay everything at once, and I knew that pressing him would only reopen wounds. So we sat down with the lawyer again. We arranged a payment plan. He would keep the house. He would pay me slowly, over several years. No rush, no interest, just trust. When we signed the papers, my hand trembled slightly, not because I was losing the house, but because I was choosing something. I was choosing my brother over brick and wood, and somehow that felt like honoring Mom more than anything else. Before everything became official, I walked through the house alone one final time. The rooms were quiet, empty in places where furniture had been removed. The hallway echoed softly with my footsteps. I stopped in Mom's bedroom. The curtains were half open. Light touched the floor gently. I could almost see her sitting in her armchair by the window, brushing her thin hair, waiting for one of us to walk in. I hope we did this right, I whispered into the still air. There was no answer, but there was peace. And sometimes, peace is enough. I stepped outside onto the front porch. The wooden boards creaked under my feet. The roses in the yard were blooming again. Daniel joined me quietly. You okay? He asked. Yes, I said. I am. We stood there side by side, not as rivals, not as children fighting for approval, just as two people who shared the same childhood, the same mother, the same grief. I was angry, he said after a moment. Not at you, just at everything. I know, I answered. I didn't want to lose my place, he added. You never did, I said gently. He looked at me, and for the first time since Mom passed, I saw my little brother again. Not the man arguing over numbers, but the boy who used to chase fireflies in this very yard. Driving home that evening, I felt something settle inside me. For weeks, I had carried the sting of his words. You don't deserve it. I had let that sentence replay over and over in my mind, but now I understood something. His words were not really about me. They were about fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of not being seen. Fear of carrying too much alone. And I had my own fears too. Fear of being erased. Fear of being less important. Fear of not being valued for the quiet love I gave. We were both afraid. And fear can sound like accusation, even when it is not meant that way. Months passed. Daniel began repainting the house. He replaced the porch swing. He planted new roses beside the old ones. He invited me over one Sunday afternoon. The house smelled like fresh paint and lemon cleaner. Different, but still familiar. We sat at the kitchen table again, drinking tea, just like before. "It feels strange," he said. "Yes," I agreed, "but good." He nodded slowly. "I'm glad it stayed." "So am I," I replied, and I meant it. Not because I owned part of it, but because it remained in the family, and because we remained siblings. I remember the morning the lawyer called. The sky outside my kitchen window was pale and quiet, a soft gray, the kind of sky that feels heavy but gentle at the same time. I had just poured my first cup of coffee. The house still smelled like cinnamon from the bread I baked the night before. When the phone rang, I almost didn't answer it, but something in me said I should. His voice was calm, professional, kind, in a distant way. "Mrs. Harper," he said softly, "we need to schedule a meeting about your mother's estate." My hands went cold. I had known this day would come. We all did. Mom had been gone 3 weeks now, 3 long, slow weeks that felt like 3 years. But hearing it said out loud, it made it real. "Yes," I whispered. "Of course." He gave me a date, a time, said my brother would be there too. My brother, Daniel. I stared at the wall for a long time after the call ended. The clock ticked louder than usual. The refrigerator hummed. The house felt empty. It was strange how a house could feel different after someone dies, even when that someone didn't live there anymore. But Mom had always felt close, even after she moved back into her own home. Now everything felt farther away. The day of the meeting arrived faster than I wanted. I wore a simple blue cardigan. Mom used to say, "Blue made my eyes look kind." I don't know if that's true, but I wore it anyway. Daniel was already sitting in the lawyer's office when I walked in. He didn't stand up. He just nodded once. "Claire." "Daniel." His hair had more gray in it than I remembered, or maybe I just hadn't noticed before. His jaw looked tight, like he had been clenching it for days. We sat across from each other. The lawyer opened a folder. Mom's handwriting was on the first page. I recognized it instantly. Small and careful. She always wrote like she didn't want to waste ink. The lawyer cleared his throat. He read through some formal things first. Bank accounts, jewelry, small savings bonds. Then he paused. "And the house," he said. My heart started beating faster. Mom's house. The white one with the rose bushes. The one with the porch swing Daniel and I used to fight over. The house where I learned to bake pies. The house where we said goodbye. The lawyer continued, "Your mother has left the house jointly to both of you." I let out a slow breath I didn't realize I was holding. Jointly. That seemed fair. Daniel didn't speak. The lawyer added gently, "However, she included a note." He handed it to Daniel first. Daniel read it silently. His face changed. Not dramatically, not in a loud way, but something shifted. His eyes hardened. Then he handed the paper to me. I read it slowly. "My dear Claire and Daniel," it began. "I know you both love this home. I also know you are different people with different needs. Please remember that love is more important than walls and wood. Make your decision together, kindly. I trust you both." I swallowed. That was Mom, always believing we would choose kindness. I looked up at Daniel. He was already staring at me. "You lived here with her," he said flatly. "Yes, for years. Yes." He leaned back in his chair. "So I think it's only fair that I take the house now." His words hit me like cold water. "What?" I asked softly. "You had your time," he said. "You were here every day. I wasn't. There was something sharp in his voice, something old. "I wasn't keeping you away," I said carefully. "I had a job," he snapped quietly. "A family, responsibilities." "And I didn't?" I asked, still calm. He didn't answer. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "We can discuss options," he said gently. "Sell and split, or one buys out the other." Daniel didn't look at the lawyer. He looked at me. "You don't deserve to keep it," he said. The room went silent. I felt my chest tighten, not because of the house, but because of that word, deserve. I had bathed Mom when she was too weak to stand. I had sat beside her hospital bed during the long nights. I had held her hand when she forgot my name. I had whispered, "It's okay, Mama. I'm here." But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I said quietly, "Why would you say that?" He looked away. "Because you already got more time with her than I did." His voice broke just slightly. We left the office without deciding anything. Daniel walked ahead of me in the parking lot. The air was cool, a little windy. I watched him unlock his car. He hesitated before getting in. "I wanted more time," he said without turning around. I felt my throat tighten. "I know," I whispered. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't about wood floors or rose bushes. This was about regret. But he drove away before I could say. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen. The house felt heavy. I thought about Mom's note. Love is more important than walls and wood. I thought about Daniel as a little boy. He used to be afraid of thunderstorms. He would climb into my bed and whisper, "Don't let the sky fall." I would tell him, "It won't. I promise." Somewhere along the way, life had made him hard. Or maybe just tired. I didn't want the house to be the reason we broke completely. I had already lost my mother. I wasn't sure I could lose my brother too. A week later, I drove to Mom's house alone. The roses were still blooming. I unlocked the door slowly. The smell hit me first, lavender and old books. I walked through each room quietly. The kitchen table still had a faint scratch from when Daniel dropped a hammer in high school. The hallway wall still had pencil marks where Mom measured our height. I touched them gently. "I'm taller," Daniel used to brag. "Not for long," I would tease. I sat down on the porch swing. It creaked softly. The sun was warm on my face, and I asked myself something I had been afraid to ask. Did I want the house because I loved it, or because I was afraid of letting go? Sometimes those two things look the same. 2 days later, I called Daniel. He didn't answer, so I left a message. "Daniel, it's Claire. I've been thinking. Call me when you're ready." He called back that evening. "What is it?" he asked. "I want to meet," I said, "at Mom's house." There was a long pause. "Why?" "Because we need to talk where she lived, not in some office." He hesitated. Then he said, "Fine." He arrived on Saturday afternoon. He stood on the porch like a visitor. I opened the door. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then he stepped inside. We walked through the house slowly. No arguing. No lawyers. Just quiet memories. In the kitchen, he ran his hand over the counter. "She used to make pancakes here every Sunday," he said softly. "Yes," I smiled. "And she always burned the first one." He almost smiled. In the living room, he sat in her old chair. It creaked under his weight. He looked smaller somehow. "I should have come more," he said quietly. I didn't rush to answer. "You were busy," I said gently. "That's not an excuse." Silence filled the room. Then he looked at me. "I was jealous," he admitted. "Of what?" "Of you. You were here. You heard her last stories. I didn't." My eyes filled with tears. "She asked about you every day," I said, "even when she forgot what year it was." He covered his face with his hands. I had not seen my brother cry since he was 10. "I thought she blamed me," he whispered. "She never did," I said firmly. "Not once." He looked at me, searching my face for truth. I nodded. She loved you deeply. She just didn't say it in big ways. He let out a long breath. The house felt different then, lighter. We sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Finally, I said, "Daniel, about the house." He stiffened slightly. "I don't want to fight you," I continued. He waited. "I'm willing to sell it. We split it evenly." He looked surprised. "You'd give it up?" I swallowed. "It's not giving up. It's choosing us." His eyes softened. "I was wrong to say you didn't deserve it," he said quietly. "That hurt." "I know." He looked down. "I'm sorry." I nodded. "I'm sorry too, for not pushing you to visit more, for not saying how much she needed you." We both carried guilt, but guilt is heavy, and we were both tired. A month later, we put the house on the market. The day the for sale sign went up, I stood at the curb and watched. It felt like closing a chapter of a book I wasn't ready to finish. Daniel stood beside me. He didn't speak, but he didn't walk away either. When the house finally sold, we split the money just as Mom wanted. But more importantly, we kept talking. We started having dinner together once a week, sometimes at my house, sometimes at his. The first time I went to his home after everything, his wife hugged me tightly. "I'm glad you two worked it out," she said softly. So was I. One evening, months later, Daniel handed me a small envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside was a photo. It was old and slightly faded. Mom stood between us, Daniel on one side, me on the other. We were children, smiling, carefree. On the back, Mom had written in her careful handwriting, "Stay close, always." I looked up at him. "I found it in her drawer," he said. I think she meant it for both of us. Tears filled my eyes again. Not the heavy kind, the gentle kind. I still miss Mom every single day. Sometimes when I smell lavender, my heart aches. Sometimes when I bake bread, I hear her humming in my memory, but I don't drive past the old house anymore. I don't need to, because I realize something important. A house holds memories, but love holds people. And I would rather have my brother beside me at the table than own every wall of the past alone. If there is one thing I learned from that painful season, it is this: inheritance can divide what love once built, but forgiveness can rebuild what pride almost destroyed. And at this age in my life, I no longer want to win arguments. I want peace. I want connection. I want the kind of family that survives loss. So when my brother once said I didn't deserve Mom's house, I thought I had lost something priceless. But in the end, by letting go of the house, I kept something far more important: my brother. And that, I believe, is exactly what Mom would have wanted.